Girl enters the wrong hotel room. She sees a distracted millionaire in the shower. Something shocking happens, and her life was never the same after that day. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and let us know in the comments from which city or country you are watching. Alyssa felt the weight of an exhausting routine in every muscle of her body. Her hands were rough from scrubbing sheets and cleaning furniture, but she did not complain. Working as a maid at the luxurious Imperium Hotel was her only way to pay for nursing school. Raised by her grandmother since she was little, she learned early on that nothing would come easy, and she was willing to fight for her future. The morning started like any other. A hallway full of cleaning carts, hurried guests coming and going, and the strong smell of cleaning products in the air. Alyssa grabbed the clipboard with the list of rooms that needed to be organized. She looked at the number of the first one and pushed the cart across the fluffy carpet to the door. Room 1309. The day was busy, and her head was buzzing with worries about the college exam that evening. As she unlocked the electronic lock with the keycard, she entered without hesitation, not realizing she had read the number wrong. The first thing she noticed was the smell. It wasn't the usual aroma of a vacant room mixed with the scent of new soap. The air was warm and humid, a light steam wafting through the crack of the bathroom door. Someone was inside. Alyssa froze. The sound of water running in the shower made her heart race. That room was occupied. Before she could turn on her heels and leave, her eyes were drawn to the slightly ajar bathroom door. Through the foggy glass, a male figure was moving. Tall, strong, and self-assured, the man in the shower seemed completely unaware of her presence. Alyssa felt a heat rise to her face. Her first instinct was to get out of there as fast as possible, but as she took a step back, she bumped into the small table next to the bed. A forgotten breakfast tray slid, and the piercing sound of porcelain shattering cut through the silence of the room. The noise was loud enough to be heard in the shower. Alyssa's heart nearly stopped when the water was abruptly turned off. She was paralyzed, knowing she no longer had time to escape. Seconds later, the bathroom door swung open. Liam appeared. The white towel wrapped around his waist, small droplets trickling down his defined chest, and his dark, piercing eyes fixed on her with a frightening intensity. His face, marked by a mix of surprise and irritation, hardened upon seeing her there. "Who the hell are you?" His voice sounded deep, cold, and domineering. Alyssa felt her throat dry up. What could she say? How would she explain that she entered the wrong room? I'm sorry, I thought that this room was empty." Her voice trembled. Liam took a step forward, narrowing his eyes. "You came in without knocking. You invaded my room." Alyssa swallowed hard, raising her hands in a gesture of surrender. "No, sir. It was a mistake. I'm a maid. I was supposed to be in room 1309. But..." She looked again at the number on the door, room 1310. She had entered the wrong place. Liam didn't seem convinced. He crossed his arms, looking her over from head to toe with a scrutinizing gaze. "That seems too convenient." "I swear, I just came in to tidy up the room. I didn't see anything. I was already leaving." The silence between the two stretched. For long seconds, Alyssa felt her face burning with shame. The smell of soap mixed with the warmth of the shower made the atmosphere even more suffocating. Liam finally sighed, running a hand through his wet hair. "Leave." That was all he said. Alyssa didn't hesitate. She turned and practically ran out of the room, not looking back. Her heart pounded in her chest. Never in her life had she felt so embarrassed. But what she didn't know was that this mistake would change her life forever. And Liam, well, he still wasn't sure if he really believed it was just a mistake. The cold of the corridor hit Alyssa's face the moment she stepped out of the room, but it was not enough to extinguish the fire of shame that rose through her body. Her heart was still pounding in her ears, drowning out even the sounds of the hotel around her. Liam's gaze, so intense and suspicious, seemed to be etched in her mind. She quickened her pace, almost running across the luxurious carpet while bringing her hands to her face, feeling her cheeks burn. How could she have been so careless? Never, in all the months working at the hotel, had she made such a grave mistake. "Breathe, Alyssa," she told herself. She needed to finish her shift without raising any more problems. And more importantly, hope that the man wouldn't file a complaint against her. If he speaks to the management, I am done. The hotel did not tolerate mistakes. Alyssa had heard stories of employees being fired for trivial reasons. A towel out of place, a poorly washed glass in room service. But invading an occupied room, that was for sure much worse. She hid in the laundry room for a few minutes, trying to catch her breath. The smell of fabric softener mixed with the heat from the machines brought brief comfort, but not enough. She needed to get back to work. So, gathering all the willpower she had, she moved on. The next few hours were a blur. Alyssa cleaned room after room on autopilot, unable to shake off the embarrassing moment she had experienced. Every time she closed her eyes, the scene returned with disturbing clarity. The sound of the shower turning off, the bathroom door opening, and that piercing gaze fixed on her. "Stop it, Alyssa!" she scolded herself while picking up a pile of used towels. But even ordering herself to forget, her body did not obey. She remembered the drops sliding down his chest, how the muscles in his arm flexed when he crossed his arms, his voice, deep, authoritative, laden with suspicion. Her face flushed again and she shook her head hard. That meant nothing. She was a maid. He was a guest. And an idiot, by the way. She remembered the rude way he had dismissed her. Not a shred of patience, not a minimum of courtesy. Rich man, she thought, irritated. She had seen several like him at the hotel. Guests who thought they owned the world, who saw employees as nothing but disposable parts. He was no different. Alyssa clung to that thought for the rest of her shift. When the clock finally signaled the end of her shift, she felt a wave of relief wash over her body. All she wanted now was to get out of there, forget that disastrous day, and study for her exam. But fate had other plans. As she crossed the staff door and entered the exit lobby, she saw him. Liam was there, waiting for her. The shock was so great that Alyssa stopped in her tracks, feeling her breath falter. What was he doing there? Unlike earlier, he was now wearing a perfectly tailored, dark suit. His hair, previously wet, was dry and slicked back, and his expression was no longer one of irritation, but of something indecipherable. Alyssa felt her stomach churn. Did he come to demand that she be fired? Before she could decide between fleeing or confronting him, Liam was already approaching. His steps were firm, filled with an irritating confidence. "Alyssa, right?" His voice was just as before, deep, striking, impossible to ignore. She blinked, surprised that he knew her name, until she realized that, of course, it was on the name, tag pinned to her uniform. "Yes," she murmured, not knowing what to expect. Liam sighed, placing his hands in the pockets of his jacket. For a moment, he seemed uncomfortable. "I want to apologize," Alyssa frowned. "Apologize?" "Yes." He looked away for a second before facing her again. "I was rude to you earlier. I know it was a mistake and I shouldn't have reacted that way." She blinked, unsure of what to say. She hadn't expected that. "Oh, it's okay," she replied hesitantly, but Liam continued. "I know that's not enough, so I want to make it up to you." Alyssa felt a strange chill in her stomach. "Make it up? How?" Liam smiled slightly. It was the first time she had seen him smile, and something in that smile threw her off balance. "By having dinner with me." Time seemed to stand still for a moment. Alyssa's eyes widened, thinking she had heard wrong. "What?" You heard me. I want to invite you to dinner. Alyssa's heart raced. This had to be a joke. Why? She asked, suspicious. Liam tilted his head slightly, watching her with a gaze that made her spine tingle. Let's just say I became curious about you. The sentence made her stomach drop. This was madness, totally insane. And yet, why was part of her tempted to say yes? The invitation lingered in the air, heavy and unexpected. Alyssa felt her heartbeat so hard it seemed to echo in her ears. Dinner? With him? Her first instinct was to refuse. It was the safest, most rational option. After all, who was this man to want to make amends with a dinner? She just wanted to forget what had happened earlier and move on with her life. But at the same time, there was something about him that made her uneasy. Liam did not look away. His demeanor was calm, but it carried something challenging. As if he knew that the simple proposal already made her doubt her own determination. Alyssa crossed her arms, trying to show firmness. I really don't think it's necessary. It's all resolved. Liam raised an eyebrow as if he had been expecting that answer. And who said it was necessary? I just want to. The casual and confident way he said that made her waver for a moment. But I can't. I have to study. I have an important exam tomorrow. Liam slightly tilted his head, as if analyzing the excuse. Then we can have a quick dinner. I don't intend to kidnap you the whole night. Alyssa pressed her lips together. The ease with which he countered her left her with no way out. Why was he being so insistent? She looked around. The hotel lobby was a constant flow of guests coming and going, carrying luggage, chatting, laughing. But somehow, she and Liam seemed to be isolated there, as if the whole world had closed around them. Alyssa took a deep breath, trying to reorganize her thoughts. He was just a rich, bored man. That was obvious. He wanted to have dinner with her because probably he thought it was fun to go out with a simple maid. Maybe he was one of those arrogant types who liked to play with humbler people just to see how they reacted. She wouldn't be one of them. I appreciate it, but I can't accept. Her voice came out firm this time. Liam remained silent for a moment. His eyes scanned her face as if trying to decipher her. Then, to her surprise, he smiled, not a mocking or arrogant smile, but one of genuine amusement. I understand, he said calmly. But tell me, Alyssa, do you always refuse unexpected invitations, or just the ones that come from me? The provocative tone stirred something inside her. I refuse any invitation that doesn't make sense. And why doesn't this one make sense? Alyssa sighed. Why did he have to be so persistent? Because I don't know you. Because I work here. Because you are a guest. Because... She hesitated for a second. Because this doesn't happen in real life. Liam laughed, a low and rough sound. Funny, I thought real life was made exactly of those unexpected things. Alyssa opened her mouth to retort, but he continued. But that's okay. I'm not going to force you into anything. For a moment, she felt like she had won. But then, he added, I just hope that when you're having dinner alone tonight, you don't regret not accepting. Before Alyssa could respond, Liam gave a slight nod and walked away, heading towards the hotel exit. She watched him disappear through the glass door, still feeling her heart pound. Was he testing her? Alyssa huffed, irritated with herself. Why? Was this affecting her so much? She shook her head and headed to the staff locker room. That man was a problem, and the best she could do was forget him. Alyssa took the crowded subway back home. The exhausting workday began to weigh on her shoulders, and all she wanted was a hot shower and a little peace to study. Upon arriving at the small apartment she shared with her grandmother, she found Victoria Davidson watching television in the living room. Alyssa, how was work today, dear? Victoria asked with her usual warm smile. Alyssa hesitated. For a moment, she thought about telling her about the incident with Liam, but decided it was better not to. Tiring as always. "Sit down for a bit, I made tea for you." Alyssa smiled, grateful for the gesture. She sat down next to her grandmother, accepting the warm cup between her hands. "And college? Are you studying properly for your exam?" Yes. I just need to review a bit more." But to her frustration, when she went to her room and opened her books, her mind couldn't concentrate. She tried to focus on the texts, but her thoughts insisted on returning to Liam, that evaluating gaze, the calm and provoking way he spoke, the insistence, and worse yet, what he had said before leaving. "I just hope that when you're having dinner alone tonight, you don't regret not accepting." Damn it! She slammed the book shut, irritated with herself. It was just dinner, just an invitation. Why was she giving it so much importance? But deep down, Alyssa knew the answer, because a part of her wanted to have accepted. And that was dangerous, very dangerous. The night was slowly advancing, and Alyssa was lying on the bed, looking at the ceiling. The small apartment she lived in with her grandmother was silent. Only the faint sound of the television on in the living room echoed in the background, a distant noise that made no difference whatsoever. She had already tried to study for hours, but her mind simply would not cooperate. Every time she tried to focus on the content of the test, her mind insisted on going back to him. Liam, that firm gaze, the tone of voice that always seemed charged with a certain challenge, the confident and imposing posture, the invitation. "I just hope that when you're having dinner alone tonight, you don't regret not accepting." Alyssa shut her eyes tightly, trying to push the memory away, but it was useless. Part of her hated to admit he was right. There she was, at home. Alone, tired, with a pile of notes she could barely understand because she was so distracted. What if she had accepted? Maybe they were at some fancy restaurant at that moment. He would be sitting across from her, probably wearing that impeccable suit, watching her with that disconcerting intensity. Maybe they were talking, and she could find out who he really was. Alyssa shifted in bed, restless. Why did it matter? He was just a guest. A rich man who, for some reason, decided to toy with the idea of taking her to dinner. She wasn't stupid. She knew how that kind of story ended. Men like him didn't genuinely care about women like her. To him, it was just a pastime. So why did it bother her so much? Alyssa sighed, frustrated. She turned to her side, squeezed her eyes shut, and forced herself to sleep. The next morning, the alarm clock rang early, and Alyssa felt the exhaustion in her body, even before she opened her eyes. She had slept poorly, restless all night long. With great effort, she got out of bed and went straight to the shower. The cold water helped clear her mind a bit. Today was a new day. She needed to forget what had happened. Focus on work. Focus on college. When she came out of the bathroom, she put on the hotel uniform and pinned her hair in a low bun. She grabbed her bag and left to catch the subway. But as soon as she arrived at the hotel and entered through the back, she felt something strange in the air. There was a buzz among the employees. Some were whispering in small groups. Others were glancing sideways at her as she passed by. Alyssa frowned. "What's going on?" she asked Lydia, another maid who was folding sheets in the laundry room. The woman looked up at her and smiled slightly. "You don't know?" Alyssa crossed her arms. "If I knew, I wouldn't be asking." Lydia chuckled softly. "They're saying the owner of the hotel arrived last night." Alyssa blinked, confused. The owner? She had never seen him before. She only knew that the Imperium Hotel belonged to a discreet magnate, someone who rarely showed up, but whose decisions controlled every detail of the place's management. "Yes, and guess where he's staying?" Alyssa's heart skipped a beat. Lydia raised an eyebrow. In room 1310, the world seemed to freeze for a moment. Alyssa felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Room 1310, the room she accidentally entered, the room where she found Liam in the shower. Her mind was spinning. It couldn't be, but at the same time everything made sense. The way Liam acted, his posture of someone who was used to being in control, the suspicious glare as if he was analyzing every move she made, the insistent invitation to dinner as if he was testing something. Alyssa leaned against the table beside her, feeling a knot form in her stomach. "Liam," she murmured without realizing. Lydia frowned. "What did you say?" Alyssa swallowed hard. "Nothing." But inside her mind was screaming. The man she thought was just a simple guest was in fact the owner of all that. Alyssa spent the rest of the day trying to act normally, but the truth was, she was a bundle of nerves. He hadn't said anything. Liam hadn't made any complaints against her, and that was undoubtedly a relief. But at the same time, the idea that he knew who she was and chose not to reveal his identity bothered her deeply. Why? Did he want to see how far her ignorance would go? Did he want to test her reaction when she found out the truth? Alyssa was lost in thought while folding towels when one of the managers approached. "Alyssa." She quickly lifted her head. "Yes," the woman handed her a folded paper. "A guest asked us to deliver this to you." Alyssa's heart raced. Before even opening it, she knew who it was from. With slightly trembling hands, she unfolded the note. "Still having dinner alone." No signature, but it didn't need one. Alyssa felt a shiver run down her spine. He knew she would find out, and now he wanted to know what she would do with that information. Alyssa held the note between her fingers, feeling the thin paper crumple under the pressure of her hand. "Still having dinner alone?" The words echoed in her mind like a silent challenge, an annoying reminder that Liam had not forgotten about her. Her heart raced and a knot formed in her throat. He knew she would find out the truth. He wanted her to know. But why? The hotel laundry was hot and stuffy, the steam from the machines making the air almost suffocating. The strong smell of soap and fabric softener mingled with the constant hum of the dryers. Alyssa squeezed the note once more before stuffing it into her apron pocket and taking a deep breath. She needed to work. She pushed the thoughts to the back of her mind and stepped out of the laundry, hurriedly walking down the staff corridor. She needed to finish her shift without making any mistakes, but it was easier said than done. While cleaning the rooms, changing sheets and scrubbing the bathrooms, her mind kept spinning, trapped in that shocking discovery. Liam was not just any guest. He was the owner of the hotel, and she, unwittingly, had invaded his room, seen more than she should have, and then declined his invitation for dinner without imagining who she was talking to. The memory of the scene in the room came back in full force, the steam escaping from the bathroom, the droplets running down his chest, the serious and suspicious look when he found her there. Alyssa felt a heat rise through her body and closed her eyes for a moment. If he wanted, he could have reported her the very moment. He could have talked to management, and she would have been fired without even a chance to explain herself. But he did none of that. Instead, he wanted to provoke her. He wanted to test her reaction. And now, with that note, he made it clear that he was not done with her yet. Alyssa took a deep breath and tightened her grip around the cleaning cloth. She was not going to fall for his game. The day dragged on. Every minute felt like an extra weight on Alyssa's shoulders. The tension was present in every movement, every exchanged glance with her co-workers. Every second, her mind went back to him. When her shift finally ended, Alyssa felt exhausted. She stored her uniform in the locker room and hurriedly tied her loose hair into a messy bun. All she wanted was to get out of there as fast as possible and forget about that note, that look, that deep voice echoing in her mind. But as she exited through the side door leading to the staff parking lot, she suddenly stopped. The air felt heavy around her. There, leaning against a luxurious black car, Liam was waiting for her. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit, his hair neatly styled, his posture relaxed. But his eyes were fixed on her, with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Alyssa felt her heart race. What was he doing there? For a moment, her instinct told her to turn around and go back inside the hotel. Pretend she didn't see him, but it was too late. Liam had already stepped forward. "So, Alyssa..." His voice sounded calm, but there was something hidden there, a tone of challenge that made her swallow hard. "Are you ready for dinner?" Alyssa crossed her arms, trying to ignore the strange chill that ran down her spine. "You really don't give up, do you?" Liam smiled slightly, a subtle smile but filled with meaning. "I'm not the type to give up easily." Alyssa narrowed her eyes. "And what exactly do you want?" Liam tilted his head slightly, watching her with that analytical and mysterious gaze. "Maybe I'm just curious." The way he said that, as if he were testing her, made Alyssa feel a warmth rise in her chest. "Curious about what?" she asked, trying to sound disinterested. Liam shrugged. "About you, about the girl who entered my room without permission and had the courage to refuse me afterward." Alyssa froze. He was enjoying this. "If I had known who you were, I would have refused just the same." Liam chuckled softly. "Really?" Alyssa pressed her lips together. He was trying to play with her. The worst part was that it was working. She should simply turn around and leave, end that conversation and move on with her life. But instead she found herself asking, "If I accept this dinner, will you leave me alone afterwards?" Liam raised an eyebrow, as if he hadn't expected that question. "If you want me to, yes." Alyssa watched him for a moment, trying to decipher his expression. He seemed completely in control of the situation, unhurried, with no fear that she might say no. "All right," Alyssa said, crossing her arms, "but no fancy restaurants, no extravagant dinners, something simple." Liam smiled, a smile that made her stomach turn. "Fair enough." Then, without breaking eye contact, he walked around the car and opened the door for her. Alyssa stood still for a moment. A part of her was screaming not to do this, not to trust him. He was a powerful man. He could manipulate her any way he wanted. But at the same time, something inside her pulled her to that car. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the adrenaline of the unknown. Maybe it was the simple fact that since the moment she saw him in that shower, nothing else had seemed normal in her life. Without thinking much, she got into the car, and unknowingly, she was about to change her life forever. Alyssa felt the soft leather upholstery under her hands as she got into the car. The smell inside was a mix of new leather and a subtle, woodsy men's cologne, discreet but present. She shouldn't be here. Her heart was racing and her mind screamed warnings that she insisted on ignoring. But now, there was no turning back. Liam gently closed the door and walked around the car, taking his place in the driver's seat. When he started the engine, the powerful roar of the vehicle made Alyssa shrink slightly. This situation was surreal. The hotel owner was beside her, driving a car that probably cost more than she would earn in her entire life. "Change of plans," Liam said casually as he maneuvered the car out of the parking lot. Alyssa furrowed her brow. "What do you mean?" He shot her a brief look before focusing on the road again. "You said you didn't want an expensive restaurant, so I'm taking you somewhere different." Alyssa felt a knot in her stomach. "What place?" Liam smiled faintly, not answering immediately. "Trust me." She laughed through her nose, crossing her arms. "I don't even know you. How can I trust you?" Liam raised an eyebrow, as if he found her response amusing. "Good point. But if it makes you feel better, I don't usually take hotel maids to shady places." Alyssa rolled her eyes. "What an honor." Liam chuckled softly, and for a moment, she realized it wasn't an arrogant laugh. It was genuine. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. On the contrary, the smooth hum of the engine filled the space between them, and Alyssa noticed that despite how tense her body was, she didn't feel afraid. She didn't trust Liam, but something about him didn't seem dangerous. At least, not in the way it should be. 20 minutes later, the car slowed down and entered a narrower street, surrounded by small old buildings. Alyssa looked out the window, trying to understand where they were. It was a simpler area, but not decrepit. Small lights hung above the street, illuminating a small corner restaurant with wooden tables scattered on the sidewalk and an irresistible smell of homemade food in the air. That wasn't what she expected. Liam parked the car and turned off the engine. "We've arrived." Alyssa looked at him surprised. "What's this place?" Liam opened a small smile, as if he liked her reaction. "It's where I used to come when I wanted to escape my own reality." She blinked. That answer caught her off guard. He didn't wait for more questions. He got out of the car and walked around to her side, opening the door naturally. Alyssa hesitated for a second before getting out. The cool evening breeze hit her skin, and the irresistible aroma of hot food immediately enveloped her. "Come on," Liam said, indicating the entrance of the restaurant. She followed him, still trying to understand what exactly was happening. The restaurant was small but cozy. The walls were covered with old paintings, and soft music played in the background. The few tables were occupied by customers who seemed familiar with the place. An elderly woman emerged from the counter, opening a warm smile upon seeing Liam. "Well, well," she exclaimed, opening her arms. "Long time no see, kid." Liam smiled, and Alyssa noticed it was a genuine smile, unlike the usual mysterious demeanor he carried. "It's been a while, Miss Marissa," he replied, leaning in to greet her with a kiss on the cheek. The lady then turned to Alyssa, evaluating her with curiosity. "And who is this beautiful girl?" Liam cast a playful look at Alyssa, who hurried to respond. "Just an acquaintance." The owner of the restaurant laughed and shot a playful glance at Liam. "Oh, I know this kind of acquaintance." Alyssa felt her face heat up. "It's not like that," she said quickly. Liam simply shrugged as if he saw no need to explain anything. Miss Marissa winked, clearly not believing her, but she didn't insist. "Sit down, dear. I'll bring something special for you." Liam chose a table further away, near a large window that overlooked the street lit by yellow lights. Alyssa sat across from him, still suspicious. "Why did you bring me here?" Liam rested his elbows on the table and intertwined his fingers, watching her closely. "Because I wanted you to know that I'm more than just the owner of a luxury hotel." The answer took Alyssa by surprise. She stared at him for a few seconds, trying to understand what he meant by that. "You act like I have an interest in knowing who you are." Liam smiled slightly. "And don't you?" Alyssa opened her mouth to respond, but she wasn't sure what to say. Before she could think of an answer, Miss Marissa returned with 2 steaming plates. The smell was incredible. "Here you go, dears. Now enjoy and don't leave any leftovers, okay?" Alyssa looked at the plate in front of her. Simple food, but clearly made with care. She picked up her fork and tried the first bite. The flavor took her by surprise. Liam noticed her expression and smiled. "Good, right?" Alyssa nodded, not wanting to give in. "It's not what I expected you to choose for dinner." Liam tilted his head, watching her with curiosity. "And what did you expect?" She shrugged. "Something extravagant, a restaurant with dishes that nobody can pronounce." Liam laughed. "I do like those things, yes. But sometimes what we really need is something that reminds us who we are." Alyssa stared at him, surprised by that answer. He wasn't anything like she thought, and in that moment she realized that perhaps she had made a mistake by believing she had already figured him out. Alyssa kept her eyes fixed on Liam for a few seconds, trying to find some clue, some gap that would reveal his true intentions. But all she found was that intense and enigmatic look, as if he was always one step ahead. She took another bite of food, savoring the warm and comforting taste that contrasted with the confusion inside her mind. He was not what she expected. Liam was not just the owner of a luxury hotel. He was more complex than that. But why did she care? So, Alyssa began, not diverting her eyes from him, what do you really want? Liam leaned back in his chair, running a finger around the rim of the glass of water in front of him. I think I made it clear already. She narrowed her eyes. Curiosity, right? He smirked. Exactly. Alyssa let out an incredulous laugh. Curiosity about me? I'm sorry, but I'm just a maid. Liam raised an eyebrow. Do you think your profession defines you? She frowned. No, but I think yours does. Liam laughed, but he didn't deny it. Maybe. Alyssa picked up the glass of water and took a sip, studying his expression. Why me? Liam stared at her for a moment, as if pondering the question. Because you are not afraid to look me in the eyes. The answer was so unexpected that Alyssa blinked. What? Liam tilted his head slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. The people around me are always wanting something. Money, favors, influence. And they usually avoid looking me directly in the eye, as if they are afraid of what I might see in them. Alyssa felt a shiver run down her spine. And what do you see in me? Liam's smile vanished, giving way to a more serious expression. Someone who is not trying to impress anyone. For some reason, that answer made her uncomfortable. Liam observed her, as if he could see through her, as if he could view all the layers she tried to hide from the world. Alyssa diverted her gaze and focused on the plate in front of her, stirring the food with her fork. Do you really think you know me? Liam gave a slight smile. Not yet, but I'm enjoying trying. Alyssa felt her stomach twist. He was dangerous, not in the obvious way, not like a man who posed a physical threat. Liam was dangerous because he knew how to play with words, because he made her feel things she shouldn't be feeling. She cleared her throat, trying to change the subject. Do you come here often? Liam relaxed in his chair, crossing his arms. I used to, a few years ago, before everything got complicated. Alyssa raised an eyebrow. Complicated how? Liam was silent for a moment, his eyes drifting for a second to the rustic decor of the restaurant. Money changes everything. Alyssa realized that was not a rehearsed answer. He truly believed that. What do you mean? Liam let out a small sigh. I used to have a simpler life. My father built the hotel from scratch, and I grew up seeing him work hard to create all of this. But when he died and I took over, things changed. Alyssa observed the way his jaw tightened. In what way? Liam turned his gaze aside, as if pondering what to say. Let's say not everyone around you wants the best for you. Alyssa felt a chill. Are you talking about your family? Liam laughed without humor. I'm talking about everyone. Alyssa felt a weight in that answer. And do you trust anyone? Liam looked back at her. Few people. The way he said that, without hesitation, made Alyssa hold her breath for a moment. There was something behind those words. Something he wasn't saying. And without wanting to, she wanted to discover what it was. The conversation unfolded unexpectedly. Alyssa didn't know what she expected from that dinner, but it definitely wasn't this. She and Liam talked about everything and nothing at the same time. He told some stories from his childhood in the hotel, about how he used to help at the front desk when he was a teenager, about how his father always told him that understanding every detail of the hotel was the key to running it one day. Alyssa realized that behind the facade of the unreachable millionaire, there was a man who carried much more than he let on. At one point, she laughed at something he said, and Liam looked at her for a moment, as if he wanted to store that image in his memory. "What is it?" Alyssa asked, still smiling. Liam shrugged. "Nothing, it's just that you look different when you smile." Her smile slowly faded. Liam studied her as if he wanted to understand something even she couldn't explain. Alyssa looked away, feeling her heart race. That man was dangerous, much more than she imagined. After they finished dinner, Liam insisted on paying the bill. Alyssa tried to protest, but he just gave her an amused look and said, "If that bothers you so much, you can pay next time." She crossed her arms. "Who said there would be a next time?" Liam smiled. "We'll see." Alyssa didn't respond. She just left the restaurant next to him, feeling the cool night air against her skin. The two walked in silence to the car, and, for the first time that night, Alyssa realized she didn't want it to end, but she couldn't let herself get carried away. When they got in the car and Liam started the engine, she looked out the window, trying to ignore the strange feeling in her chest. But then, Liam broke the silence. "Do you think destiny is something real, Alyssa?" She turned her face to him, surprised by the question. "What?" Liam kept his eyes on the road, but there was something different in his tone of voice. "They say some things are meant to happen, that certain meetings are not coincidences." Alyssa felt a chill run down her spine. "Why are you saying this?" Liam hesitated for a second before answering. "Because I have a feeling meeting you wasn't an accident." Alyssa was left speechless. She wanted to believe this was just a game, that Liam was just having fun with her. But for the first time, she had a feeling that something bigger was happening, and that scared her more than anything else. The silence inside the car was thick, almost palpable. Liam's words still hung in the air, provoking an unrest within Alyssa that she didn't know how to handle. "I have the feeling that meeting you wasn't an accident." She wanted to retort, laugh, say that he was exaggerating, but couldn't. Something in the way he said those words stopped her. She turned her gaze away, focusing on the landscape passing by the window. The glow of the city lights reflected on the car windows, creating a play of shadows and light. This can't be happening. Alyssa had never allowed herself romantic fantasies. Her life had always been based on reality, effort, and renunciations. She didn't have time for that kind of thing. So why was her heart racing? Her breathing was controlled, but her thoughts were far from it. Liam kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel, but Alyssa felt he was attentive to every movement she made. He noticed everything, and that bothered her. She crossed her arms, trying to ignore the tension that grew between them. "Do you always say things like that to all the women you date?" she asked, without looking at him. Liam smiled but didn't take his eyes off the road. "And do you always flee from any possibility of something real?" Alyssa pressed her lips together. He was good at this, always turning any provocation from her into something that made her question herself. "I'm not fleeing." Liam shot a quick glance at her, raising an eyebrow. "Not? Then tell me, why do you seem so uncomfortable right now?" Alyssa felt her body tense. "Because I don't like feeling like I'm falling into a game I didn't ask to play." Liam chuckled softly. "What if I said it's not a game?" Alyssa finally looked at him. "Then I would say you're good at seeming convincing." Liam gripped the wheel tighter, but his smile remained. "You have a very cynical view of the world, Alyssa. I prefer to call it realistic." The car slowed down as he entered a quieter street, approaching the neighborhood where Alyssa lived. "Maybe one day I'll make you change your mind." Alyssa laughed, shaking her head. "Good luck with that." Liam didn't respond, but the way his eyes sparkled in the reflection of the streetlight indicated that he liked a challenge, and Alyssa felt that she had just become one. The car finally stopped in front of the building where Alyssa lived. She looked out the window, feeling the weight of reality fall on her shoulders. The world she was returning to was completely different from the one Liam lived in. He turned off the engine, but made no attempt to say goodbye immediately. Alyssa turned to him, ready to thank him for dinner and end the night once and for all. But before she could say anything, Liam broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" She hesitated for a second. "What is it?" Liam rested an arm on the wheel and looked at her seriously. "Why do you never think of yourself?" Alyssa blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Liam tilted his head slightly. "Since I met you, all I've heard is about how hard you work, about how you fight to earn things. But have you ever stopped to think about what you really want? About what makes you happy?" Alyssa opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her silence seemed to be the answer Liam was expecting. He sighed, leaning back in his seat. "That's what I thought." Alyssa furrowed her brow. "Do you think it's easy? That I can just drop everything and go after what makes me happy?" Liam watched her closely. "I don't think it's easy, but I think you're afraid to even consider the idea." Alyssa felt a tightness in her chest. Liam didn't know anything about her. Didn't know what it was like to grow up without parents, being raised by a grandmother with financial difficulties. Didn't know how many nights she had gone to bed hungry to save money for college, and yet he saw her in a way no one had ever seen her before. She didn't want to admit it, but he was right. She never thought of herself. It had always been about survival, about achieving something better, but never about what made her happy. Alyssa looked away, feeling a knot in her throat. "I need to go in," she said quickly, opening the car door. Liam didn't try to stop her, but just as she was about to leave, he spoke once more. "Alyssa." She stopped, but didn't turn around. "What happened between us? You know this doesn't end here, right?" Alyssa felt a shiver run down her body. She knew, but she didn't respond. She just closed the door and walked to the entrance of the building. When she reached the lobby and looked back, Liam's car was still there. He was watching her, and at that moment Alyssa realized she was more involved than she wanted to admit. Alyssa closed the building's door behind her and took a deep breath, trying to calm the thoughts that were hammering in her mind. Her heart was still racing, as if something inside her had been stirred up and turned upside down. She wanted to forget that night. She wanted to pretend that Liam didn't affect her, that his gaze didn't make her feel exposed, that his presence didn't mess up everything she had always kept under control. But as she climbed the stairs and unlocked the door to the small apartment she shared with her grandmother, she immediately knew that forgetting would be impossible. Victoria was sitting on the sofa with the television on, but her eyes were fixed on Alyssa as soon as she entered. "Where have you been, dear?" Her grandmother's voice was filled with curiosity, but without an accusatory tone. Alyssa hesitated for a second before answering. "At work." The answer came out automatically, but her grandmother's attentive gaze remained on her. "At work at this hour?" Alyssa sighed and threw her bag on the table. "I went out with a colleague." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Colleague?" Alyssa cursed herself internally. It was clear that her grandmother wasn't going to be satisfied with that answer. "It's just an acquaintance." The elderly woman crossed her arms and smiled to the side. "Ah, I see. The famous just an acquaintance." Alyssa rolled her eyes, grabbing a glass of water and leaning against the countertop of the tiny kitchen. "Don't even start, Grandma." Victoria laughed and turned her attention back to the television, But Alyssa knew that the woman was still curious, but she didn't even know how to answer that. What was Liam to her? She closed her eyes and tried to ignore the uncomfortable feeling in her chest. This couldn't be anything. She couldn't allow herself that. The night passed slowly. Alyssa tossed and turned in bed countless times, her mind unable to switch off. The next day, when she woke up, she still felt Liam in her thoughts. The worst part was that the idea of seeing him again at the hotel gave her butterflies in her stomach. But she refused to entertain any expectations. She got dressed quickly, pinned up her hair and left before her grandmother could ask more questions. The journey to the hotel was silent, but her head was a mess. When she arrived at work, the hotel was as busy as always. Guests were circulating. Through the lobby, employees rushed back and forth, luggage being carried to the luxurious rooms. Alyssa tried to focus on the job. She cleaned the first rooms of the day, changed sheets, organized the cleaning cart. She kept herself busy, as if that could push the thoughts away. But fate had other plans. She was leaving the elevator corridor when she saw him. Liam was standing in the center of the lobby, impeccably dressed in a dark blue suit. He was talking to two suited men, apparently worried about something, but still his eyes found Alyssa's amid the crowd. And then he smiled. Alyssa felt her stomach flip. She quickly looked away and quickened her pace. She couldn't deal with this now. But before she could escape, she heard his voice. Alyssa. Her body froze at that instant. She closed her eyes for a second before turning slowly. The two suited men were still there, but Liam no longer seemed interested in the conversation. He was interested in her. "Can you come with me for a moment?" he asked, his voice calm, but laden with something Alyssa couldn't identify. She looked around. Some employees were already whispering among themselves, exchanging curious glances. The owner of the hotel calling a maid to speak privately? That wasn't normal. Alyssa took a deep breath and nodded. Liam waved off the men and then walked toward the private elevator. Alyssa followed him, feeling her heart race. As the elevator doors closed, the silence between them became suffocating. "Why did you call me?" she asked, crossing her arms. Liam observed her for a moment before responding. "Because I wanted to see you." Alyssa felt a shiver. "Liam, what is it?" She pressed her lips together. "This can't happen. I work for your hotel." Liam gave a small smile. "And? And you are the owner." Liam tilted his head slightly, as if contemplating what she was saying. "And since when does that prevent anything?" Alyssa let out a frustrated sigh. "Since always. It's not right. People are already talking." Liam took a step closer to her. "And do you care what they say?" Alyssa felt her heart beating faster. He was very close. "I care about losing my job." Liam held her gaze, his expression growing more serious. "That will never happen." Alyssa didn't know what to answer. The elevator stopped on the top floor. The doors opened, revealing a long, luxurious corridor. Liam stepped out and looked back, waiting for her. Alyssa hesitated. If she stepped out of that elevator, she knew she was crossing a dangerous line. But at that moment, everything in her screamed to follow him, and then she stepped out. The sound of the elevator closing behind Alyssa seemed to seal her fate. There was no turning back. The hallway on the top floor of the hotel was absurdly luxurious. The soft carpet muffled the sound of footsteps, and the enormous crystal chandeliers cast shimmering reflections on the marble walls. Alyssa felt her heart pounding in her chest as she followed Liam, her eyes fixed on his broad back. She did not know what awaited her, and that frightened her. Liam stopped in front of a door at the end of the hallway and passed his access card through the lock. The small electronic beep sounded, and he pushed the door open, holding it for Alyssa to enter. She hesitated for a second. If she entered, she would cross a line that she could never undo. But somehow, her feet moved on their own. Alyssa stepped inside. The room was gigantic. It felt more like a penthouse than a simple hotel room. The glass walls revealed an impressive view of the city where the light shone like an infinite sea of artificial stars. In the center of the room, a spacious sofa was positioned in front of a modern coffee table with an already opened bottle of wine beside 2 glasses. Alyssa turned to face Liam. "What exactly are we doing here?" Liam closed the door behind him and watched her with his arms crossed. "We are talking," Alyssa let out a dry laugh. "Talking? You brought me to your presidential suite to talk." Liam smiled slightly. "I could have done that in the elevator, but I knew you would. Run away before I could say what I wanted." Alyssa crossed her arms, narrowing her eyes. "And what do you want to say?" Liam took a few steps toward her, but did not get close enough to scare her, just enough for her to feel the weight of his presence. "You said you're afraid of losing your job, that people will talk." Alyssa nodded, keeping a firm gaze. "And I'm not wrong." Liam tilted his head slightly. "Maybe, but tell me one thing, Alyssa." His voice dropped slightly, becoming almost a whisper. "If I weren't the owner of the hotel, if I were just any guest, would you still be trying to fight against this?" The air disappeared from her lungs. Alyssa blinked, trying to process the question. "What?" Liam gave a half smile. "If I were just an ordinary guy, would you have already given in to this attraction between us?" Alyssa felt her stomach sink. He was testing her, playing with words as always, but the worst part was that she did not know the answer. Alyssa opened her mouth, ready to deny, ready to say that there was no attraction there, that this was all a game in his head. But deep down, she knew she would be lying. The problem was never just that he was the owner of the hotel. The problem was that Liam made her feel things she had never allowed herself to feel before. She averted her gaze to the view of the city, trying to organize her thoughts. "That doesn't matter." Liam let out a low laugh. "If it didn't matter, you wouldn't be here now." Alyssa squeezed her eyes shut for a second. Why did he always have an answer for everything? The silence between them stretched. Alyssa could hear her own breathing, the distant sound of the city outside and the light clinking of ice melting inside the wine glass on the table. She needed to leave. Now. "Liam." "I can't," Alyssa whispered, more to herself than to him, but to her surprise, Liam did not try to convince her. He simply nodded. "It's okay." Alyssa blinked, surprised by the easy response. "What?" Liam put his hands in his pockets and gave a small smile. "You can go. Right now, if you want. I won't stop you." Alyssa watched him, trying to understand what the play was. Why was he giving up so quickly? But then Liam stepped to the side, opening space between her and the door. "But if you leave now, Alyssa, you have to understand that this will be the last time." She felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean that if you go out that door now, I will never insist on this again. I will never tease you. I will never try to convince you of anything." Alyssa felt a knot in her throat. "And if I stay?" The question escaped before she could stop herself. Liam looked at her seriously. "If you stay, that changes everything." Alyssa felt her heart race. That was the ultimate choice. If she left, everything would go back to normal. She would continue her routine at the hotel, study for her college, and try to forget that she ever crossed paths with him. But if she stayed, Alyssa knew she would be opening a door to something she could never control. The silence between them became suffocating. Alyssa felt her whole body trembling with nerves, but deep down, she already knew her decision. She had always known. And then, with one last shaky breath, Alyssa took a step back and walked out the door. The soft sound of the door closing behind Alyssa was like a crack in Liam's chest. She left. For a long moment, he stood in the middle of the presidential suite, looking at the closed door, feeling a strange tightness inside himself. He shouldn't be surprised. Alyssa was strong, determined, stubborn. From the beginning, he knew she was different. She was not like the people who orbited his life, always wanting something in return. And maybe that was exactly why he wanted her to stay so much. But she chose to leave, and Liam, for the first time, felt the bitter taste of not getting what he wanted. He ran his hands over his face, letting out a long sigh. That was it. No more insistence, no more provocations. She made it clear what she wanted. He needed to respect that. But then, why was the feeling of loss so strong? Alyssa took the elevator. Down, feeling her heart heavy. With each floor she passed, she tried to control the urge to look back. She made the right decision. She knew that. But why did it seem that by leaving through that door, she was leaving something behind that she could never recover? The elevator reached the ground floor and the doors opened. Alyssa quickly exited, crossing the lobby without looking sideways, indifferent to the curious gazes of some staff members. She needed to get out of there. She needed to breathe. When she reached the street, the night breeze hit her skin, but it brought no relief. Her heart remained heavy. For a moment, Alyssa stopped, looking at the dark sky above the illuminated buildings. She had never had doubts before. Every choice she made in life had always been with a clear purpose: to survive, to grow, to build a better future. And now, for the first time, she was unsure if she had made the right choice, but it was too late to turn back, right? The following days were a blur. Alyssa threw herself into work more than ever, trying to fill the empty spaces in her mind with repetitive tasks. But nothing seemed to work. Liam did not try to look for her, and that somehow hurt her more than she wanted to admit. She saw him sometimes from a distance in the hotel lobby, in important meetings, surrounded by businessmen and staff who treated him with the absolute respect he always demanded. But he never looked at her the way he did before, as if he had erased her from his life. And Alyssa realized that no matter how hard she tried to escape how she felt, she could no longer deny the truth. She missed him. Truly missed him. Victoria Davidson noticed before Alyssa even had the courage to admit. "There's something wrong with you, girl," said her grandmother one night, while Alyssa tried to pretend to study. Alyssa sighed, without lifting her eyes from the book. "I'm fine, Grandma." But the woman just shook her head. "I know that look. It's the look of someone who has let something important slip away." Alyssa pressed her lips together. She wanted to deny it, wanted to say her grandmother was wrong, but she wasn't. And at that moment, Alyssa realized she could no longer run away. She needed to do something before it was too late. The next morning, Alyssa made a decision. She waited for the right moment, watching from afar as Liam finished a meeting in the hotel restaurant. And as soon as he was alone, she approached. Liam raised his eyes when he saw her, and for a brief second, Alyssa saw something different pass through his gaze. But then he simply leaned back in his chair, adopting a neutral expression. "Alyssa," he said calmly, "what are you doing here?" Alyssa took a deep breath, gathering courage. "We need to talk." Liam raised an eyebrow. "I thought you made it clear that you didn't want this anymore." Alyssa swallowed hard. "I thought you wanted it too." Liam looked at her for a moment before letting out a small sigh. "Sit down." She obeyed. The two sat in silence for a few seconds. Then, Alyssa finally said what she had been holding inside. "I was wrong." Liam said nothing, just waited. Alyssa looked directly into his eyes. "I left because I was scared." Liam remained silent. Alyssa continued, "Afraid to take risks, afraid to allow myself to feel something I had never felt." Before, I spent so much time trying to keep everything under control that I forgot that some things just happen. She took a deep breath before saying, "And I regret leaving that night." Liam watched her, his eyes analyzing every detail of her face, as if trying to understand if she was telling the truth. Then, after a long silence, he finally spoke. "And what do you want now, Alyssa?" Alyssa felt her heart race. She had already made the decision. "I want to try." Liam was silent for another moment, and then the smile Alyssa thought she would never see again appeared on his face. "That changes everything, you know." Alyssa smiled back, feeling a wave of relief and mixed expectation inside her. "I know." Liam watched her for a moment and then, with a calm gesture, extended his hand across the table. Alyssa hesitated for a second, but this time she did not run away. She intertwined her fingers with his, and she knew that, regardless of what happened from that point on, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The end. And now tell me, have you ever experienced an unexpected encounter that changed your life? If this story touched your heart, leave a comment sharing your opinion. I want to know what you would do in Alyssa's place. Write in the comments. Do you believe that destiny can unite two people like this? Until next time.